So we have no new cases of COVID-19 to confirm in Queensland this morning. In fact, our total number of cases goes backwards one because of that false positive that we were able to confirm late yesterday. Our number of active cases has also gone down to 11. 6 of those cases remain in hospital. I've continued to be blown away by the support of Queenslanders in going and getting tested. In the last 24 hours, 16,183 people got tested. Our pathology labs, both public and private, processed 17,723 tests. That's a fantastic effort. And if you recall that we had set ourselves a target of 5,000 tests a day, we had described our total capacity at 10,000 tests a day. So to be consistently doing that level of testing is a great result. We thank Queenslanders for coming forward. We, of course, thank our scientists and lab workers for their efforts, and it's that high testing level that can give us a degree of confidence around community transmission, a degree of confidence around whether there is any transmission that we aren't aware of. Since we confirmed those cases of young women who returned from Melbourne, we have done 119,495 tests in that just over a week, 9-day period, bringing the total number of Queenslanders now tested to nearly 580,000 cases. Given it's more than a week, this weekend, the stakes remain high, but we would hope in coming days to have some level of satisfaction, some level of comfort that there hasn't been additional community transmission caused by those cases. Of course, we continue to closely monitor cases in New South Wales and Victoria. As of yesterday, New South Wales was reporting 270 active cases. Victoria was reporting 7,449 active cases for a daily average of new cases of 519. We have been working hard these last couple of days to prepare for that hard border closure at 1 a.m. tomorrow morning. I'd ask people coming to the state and returning to the state for their patience today and over the next few days. I want to thank everyone at the Queensland Police Service and within Queensland Health who have been putting those measures together and preparing for them. A range of information was uploaded to the Queensland Health website this morning. The directions themselves, some maps, as well as some frequently asked questions, which we hope will address a lot of the questions people have. The team continue to work on the information technology system behind the border pass updates, and we hope will come online late today. These new tough border restrictions are all about keeping Queensland and Queenslanders safe. They are all about keeping the virus out of Queensland, protecting the lives of Queenslanders so that we can continue with our plan to recover our economy and get people back to work. The Chief Health Officer and the Deputy Commissioner will say a few words in a moment about reports that there are protests planned to be held this weekend. And I want to say very clearly that any breach of our health directions could put the lives of Queenslanders at risk. We are not out of the woods yet from those cases that we have confirmed over the last week or so. And to people who are concerned about the treatment of refugees, I understand your concern. I appreciate your concern. However, your concern is with decisions of the federal government, not with Queenslanders who could be put at risk, whose health could be put at risk if these protests were to go ahead. If the weekend goes well, if we continue to not record cases of community transmission, the Chief Health Officer hopes to, next week, be able to lift the restrictions on people visiting aged care facilities. That's what's at stake here, whether hundreds of Queenslanders can have their families visit them in their nursing homes or not. The decision, anyone's decision, to breach these directions and put that at risk, put the ability of people to have their family members visit them in their nursing care facility at risk is not selfless, it is selfish. They should not think for a moment that they are part of one of the world's great protest movements. Those great protest movements put their own lives at risk. Those protests put their own lives at risk, not the lives of others, not the lives of innocent people. And as the Deputy Commissioner will underline, we will not allow them to proceed.
So no new cases overnight in Queensland, which is a fantastic result. And we can start to think that we might be able to relax at the start of next week if we have another 2 days of no new community-acquired cases. So we so far have 5 cases related to those 3 women who travelled down to Melbourne. And if we have no further cases in the next few days, then we'll be able to review all of those onerous restrictions we put in place. But please, we can't yet relax. This weekend, it is really, really important that if anyone is unwell, develops any symptoms, has any symptoms, they immediately isolate and come forward and get tested. And I ask every single Queenslander, this weekend we have to absolutely follow all those social distancing rules. They are really important. Maintain 1.5 metre distance at all times, wash your hands, small gatherings, all of those things are critical. So that is why I just say, please do not go and protest this weekend. It is critical because it'll be a tough decision to make on Monday. If we've seen large breaches of those Chief Health Officer directions, then I'll have to take that into consideration about the advice I give the community. So we need to, all of us, think very, very carefully what we're doing so we protect our community. So I ask everyone to continue doing that. Queenslanders have been amazing to see the number of people who've come forward since that group returned from Melbourne to be tested and to cope with all of those delays at the fever clinics that we saw, to cope with waiting for those results and the anxiety that that causes, to do all of that and potentially have it undone because people breach those requirements this weekend would be an awful thing to see. So I do encourage everyone, please continue doing what you've been doing, continue following all the directions. Now, as of 1 a.m. Saturday, our borders have toughened again because of what we are continuing to see in New South Wales. So New South Wales has done such a brilliant job to maintain where they are, but despite that, they're still seeing every single day cases that they can't link back to known outbreaks. So that's why we really, to keep Queenslanders safe, we need to reinstitute those border controls. It means a lot of inconvenience for a lot of people. I understand that. And we've seen large numbers of Queenslanders coming back through the borders in the last few days, which is good. So from 1 a.m. Saturday, only people who live in those border communities, so Tweed and those local government areas that are adjacent to the border, are able to cross the border freely. They can only come into the adjacent communities on the other side of the border. They can't go through the rest of Queensland. That's really, really important. I know their lives are lived across the border, which is why they need to be able to come in. Anyone else from anywhere else in New South Wales or the ACT or of course Victoria cannot come into Queensland unless they fly and they come through the airport and they've got an exemption to be in Queensland. So they're a Queenslander returning home, or they're someone who has an exemption to come into Queensland for whatever purpose that may be. Now, the vast majority of those people, of course, to keep Queenslanders safe, will need to go into hotel quarantine for 14 days. There are some exemptions. People will need to apply for those exemptions, but there are very, very few. And that is so important for us to do at this point in time while we see those ongoing cases happening in New South Wales and the ACT. And really, it's about them having to manage those cases that came through into both New South Wales and ACT that came through into their states from Victoria. Now that they have closed their border and New South Wales has introduced mandatory hotel quarantine for Victorians or people who've been in Victoria coming into New South Wales, that will assist them to get on top of all of their cases. So hopefully we will be able to remove those restrictions as soon as New South Wales has been able to get on top of their cases. And I have great confidence that they'll be able to do that. So that is really important. Now, there's a lot of information on our website about the implications of that border change and what it means, who can travel, what sort of border passes are needed, what needs to be done. It is a complicated process, but if you have a look at the website, you'll get a lot of the information and the questions. If you've got more questions, put them through and we'll sort out answers and share them with everyone, because if you've got a question, there's a big chance there are lots of other people who have that question, and we'll just work that through. So today in Queensland, good news, another day of no cases, but it's too soon to relax. It's far too soon. We've still got to be really, really careful and diligent as we continue to go forward. So thank you.
Morning, everyone. If I could just start with some figures around what's happening at our borders. As we've expected, the last couple of days have proven quite busy, with an increase in the numbers coming across. We had 73 flights yesterday, 3,393 passengers were processed, 42 put into quarantine and 12 refused entry, and increase at our road borders as well. 6,223 vehicles were checked, 68 people refused entry and 54 have gone into quarantine. If I could stay on borders for the moment, that's obviously an area of great concern for the community about what's going to happen. As you've heard from the Chief Health Officer, as of 1 a.m. we moved to the new regime. Look, to put that really simply, Victoria, ACT and New South Wales all become hotspots unless you have one of the exemptions. And that's you're a cross-border person, so you'll get an X pass for that. Whether you've got you're doing freight supply and you have your F pass for that, or whether you're a specialist worker and you have an S pass, and you must satisfy the criteria for that, and you must have those passes and meet those criteria before you'll get one. You're not going to be allowed into Queensland. And you're not going to be allowed into Queensland at all over the road borders. So for those people coming perhaps out of South Australia or West Australia, they need to understand they can't come into Queensland through those states. As soon as they enter those states, they've entered the hotspot, they won't be allowed in. Queenslanders wanting to return after 1 a.m. tomorrow morning will need to come back by flight, unless they have the exemptions. Our officers are ready to enforce that. We are working on the IT system at the moment. Obviously, we're trying to include identification in the new process so people can put those details into the system. Very hopeful that will be up and running by this afternoon. But if we have any glitches, we're in the IT world there, I can guarantee everyone that we will still enforce the new system, and then everyone will get stopped as at 1 a.m. until we can catch up with that system. So very pleased to say that Health have already put up the directions and the maps. So for those people that are concerned about whether they are in a cross-border area or not, they need to check the website. That's the best place to go for that. And on that, please make sure that you're certain around doing that. And it's also, if people are living in the Tweed, need to understand that does not mean you can go anywhere in New South Wales and then come back and go across the border. That's not on either. They need to stay in their bubble if they want to be able to come across. Following up our advice yesterday around our compliance checking of people in quarantine, of those 3 matters under investigation, we've located one, and that person's been issued with a fine, an on-the-spot fine for disobeying the direction. The other 2 remain under investigation. We have 4 matters under investigation in total at the moment in relation to the Chief Health Officer's directions. On the protest activity, I think I should mention about that, and I'll say it again, now is not the time, and this is not the way to do a protest around things that these people may think is important. They have so many other options at their disposal to lawfully protest. Going onto the Story Bridge and blocking it is not a lawful protest. We will do whatever we can, and we are still examining the legal options we have at our disposal to prevent that, but we're realistic enough to know that some people will still try to protest. So there is a very large police operation in place for tomorrow. They will not be permitted to block the Bradfield Highway, the Story Bridge. We will take action, and if people commit offences, they can expect to be arrested. I have to say for the community, but of course, an operation of that nature, just trying to keep things safe, will mean there will be disruption. So if people could put that into their planning and understand that the Story Bridge tomorrow may well be a place to stay away from and look for alternate routes across the river. And that goes for everyone at all of our borders and everything that's going on through the COVID response at the moment. Just to say, as Janetta said, say thank you for everything so far, but please remain patient and listen to the messaging. We expect the road borders in particular to be quite problematic over the weekend, and please work with us.
People in the border communities, are they allowed to cross into Queensland and vice versa for any reason?
I might leave the directions to the Chief Health Officer, but I understand that's correct.
And if they are, how do you stop them going any further than the Gold Coast?
Well, it's like anything, Lane, with all of these things. They're travelling into the state with a particular border pass on it. We'll have the same process in place where we want them to display that. If they are outside of the area that they're permitted to do that, we'll soon pick that up through the border pass and through normal interceptions. We want people to work with us on this. The vast majority of people are truthful, are trying to do the right thing, don't want the COVID to spread into our community. We expect them to do that. Those that don't do the right thing, we'll be watching out for them. Well, it is in part, but we've been pretty effective at identifying people that haven't done the right thing and responding to that. And I think the systems work pretty well if you look where Queensland's at the moment.
Steve, on the protest tomorrow, you said that you're still examining the legal options. Presumably there's a cut-off time for when you have to apply to court at the courts if you're going to go down that route. When is that?
I'm still waiting for the legal advice on where that's at the moment, so we'll get a brief later on that. But look, we'll continue to push that right up to the moment. These are matters that we have to put before courts in a particular way, so we're working with the other agencies, the Department of Justice and Attorney General, on how we can do that.
So is it Queensland Police intention to apply?
If we can get an instrument to prevent this protest happening, we will do that. There are legal issues. You have to prove who the organisers are and all those sorts of things. So we're trying to work through that. But we're realistic enough to know that may not discourage people anyway. So we're ready with our operation to go.
Have you been in contact?
Protesters have said this morning, the organisers, that if refugees are allowed to move around and exercise, then they'll call the protests off. Are you aware of that?
I have heard there have been demands. It's not really something I can help with. These are Commonwealth government matters and in the purview of the Commonwealth government.
Have you been in contact with the organisers for the protest?
There's been some people been in contact with. We have to yet determine whether they're in fact organised or not. That's what we're working through.
Can we get the VP on a couple issues? I know you're a big Broncos fan, but what is your thoughts on Wayne Bennett?
Nobody is above these rules. The rules that apply to people in the NRL and associated with the NRL were developed by the NRL. They were endorsed by our Chief Health Officer, and it's incredibly important that people comply with them and that they are enforced. And that is precisely what has happened here. It's disappointing to see a leader like Wayne Bennett contravene these rules. I think he, if anyone, should have understood what was at stake. I'm sure he was looking forward to coming up here to the game against the Broncos, and he's going to miss out on that. That's quite a stiff penalty. Oh, is it? Sorry.
He apparently went to the training though, so he's potentially, gone into the South team. Who's he coaching at?
South.
Yeah. So he's gone into their team and they're going to play Brisbane tonight. Is there any quarantining issue with the Broncos and the teams that need to be addressed?
The Chief Health Officer is better across the detail of the NRL plan and what it will mean for those other players, but he has put his team at risk, his team's ongoing participation in the competition at risk, even the ongoing competition at risk. That's what's at stake here, and none of us want to see that. I certainly don't want to see that, and I hope that that's not the outcome here, but that makes it a pretty expensive pizza, I guess.
Ardent Leisure has, just before you go into
Sure.
DP, Ardent Leisure has announced to the ASX this morning that the Queensland government has given it a nearly $70 million loan to reopen Dreamworld and some of its theme parks in the Gold Coast. What do you know about that?
Thousands of Queenslanders are employed by our theme parks on the Gold Coast. They are the draw cards that bring others to the Gold Coast and employ thousands of other Queenslanders. And so, unfortunately, the Queensland government was forced to step in when the federal government failed to support our theme parks. This support applies to both Dreamworld and the operators of the other Gold Coast theme parks and is designed to ensure that they can continue to employ people so that they can stay open and keep attracting Queenslanders to the Gold Coast for their holidays.
So what's the total figure? So Dreamworld Art of Leisure gets $70 million. What are the other operators of the other parks?
I don't have the total figures to hand. I'm happy to get those for you, but they're roughly similar figures.
There's some panic buying on the Sunshine Coast. Are you concerned that people are still indulging in this?
Look, I'm unaware of the details of that, but what I can assure Queenslanders is that we have strong supply chains, that we produce more food than we consume, that the country produces more toilet paper than we need, that we now have very substantial supplies and supply chains of hand sanitizer. So there is no reason to be stockpiling anything. And as I said when we saw the last round of this, to do so is just selfish. It is those who have the means to buy ahead, taking from those who live week to week, pensioners, those on low incomes. And so I would urge everyone to think not of themselves, but of the wider community, of their neighbours, and only buy what you need.
And there's been some extended safety shutdowns this morning at Cross River Rail. Are you concerned about that? That's something the union are pursuing, or do you think that it's the union just causing some trouble?
I'm not across the intimate detail of those issues, but workplace safety is critical. Every single Queenslander deserves to go to work and be safe, and this is a government that has taken very strong measures to ensure workplace safety.
Have any decisions been made yet around pandemic leave?
No, those discussions continue. I've been meeting with those unions and discussing what the options are. It's a different proposition to the other workforce segments that have already finalised those kinds of arrangements. But clearly, we appreciate our health workforce. They have done amazing things this year, and we will do whatever we can to recognise, support, and thank them.
Do you think those pandemic
I would hope so, but that's, as I say, subject to the arrangements that we finalise. It's not, hospitals aren't like schools. We can't just close them for 2 days, and so we need to work through what arrangements might work in a hospital context.
I want to just clarify about those border communities. I think you said on radio, anybody can cross for any reason if they're in that group?
If you live in one of those border communities south of the border between Queensland and New South Wales, and they're essentially the local government area that abuts the border, you can go from any of those communities into the equivalent community across the other side, so anywhere along the LGA along that part of the border, for any reason, for any time.
And how far north of the stretch? Is it to Coomera or?
Yeah, no, so if you have a look on the website, it's probably the best way of looking, but it's the local government area. So it's the local government area on the Queensland side, the local government area on the New South Wales side, and you can move freely between the two. You can't, if you live in New South Wales, go any further north than that, and you can't, if you're in Queensland, go any further south. It's just the border communities.
Explain this issue with Bennett, and he went through his training, and now the team's going to play the Broncos. What concerns should we have if there's, everyone mixing? Are the Broncos going to have any restrictions put on them or Souths?
No, because as far as I know, Mr. Bennett isn't a confirmed case. So if he was a confirmed COVID case, then that would cause all sorts of problems. This is just a very strong process that the NRL has put in place to minimise any risks. And the NRL management, I can't commend more highly. They have done a very thorough process, and whenever there's been a breach, they've acted very promptly and they've kept me informed. So no, I don't think there are further risks. And what the NRL has done is to show that they have been solid in making sure that people adhere to their protocols, which are very sensible protocols.
There are concerns about potential cluster
Yes.
What are your thoughts on borders still being open to residents of SA who come into Queensland?
Yeah, but at the moment they do have cases, and this is what I discuss with my colleagues every single day at 12:30, so I know all the cases around the country. At the moment it's limited and it's under control. If it became less limited, there was community transmission, they didn't know where that was coming from, then of course we'd look at what we needed to do to respond. But at this point in time, they have it, it's manageable. The issue for New South Wales is that every single day they're getting a couple of cases that they have no idea where they've come from.
Just as well on exemptions on people coming in to Queensland from New South Wales. For example, can you just clarify what the line would be? I would presume that medical professionals would likely get an exemption. But for example, if you had a medical...
Can I answer the medical professional one? So medical professionals who have a job in Queensland, yes, they get an exemption, but they have to go into hotel quarantine for 2 weeks before they start work, unless they're in the border community. So if they're in the border community, no different to any other person in the community, they can cross over. That's fine. But if they're outside the border community, then they have to go into hotel quarantine. They need an exemption from me to be able to come into the state, and then they have to go into hotel quarantine.
So when we talk about an exemption, we're not actually talking about an exemption from hotel quarantine. We're only talking about it in terms of actually being allowed entry to the state.
Yeah. People need 2 exemptions. They first need an exemption if they're not a Queenslander. Any Queenslander can come into the state. If they're not a Queenslander, then they need an exemption to be able to come into Queensland. That's the first part of the decision making. The second part is where they need to do quarantine. So there are a very small number who don't need to do quarantine, so they're the people that bring freight into our state. There's some of our very, very essential critical workers, and health staff are not included in that. Then there's another group of people who can quarantine at home. You might have seen that when I asked people to go down to Victoria to assist Victoria with their response, I allowed those people, if they had a suitable home environment, to quarantine at home. So that's in place. And then the third group, the vast majority, who need to go into hotel quarantine. And there's very few exemptions from that.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Dan.
Are the 2 women who came back from Melbourne, are they still being treated in hospital?
Yes, they are.
Are they stable?
They're stable, but yes, they're still in hospital. So we need to do clearance swabs on them, and they're still testing positive at this point in time. Thank you.